Now, if you're a beginner photographer and you're just getting into portrait photography, you like the idea of taking pictures of people, working with models, etc. Maybe you've got clients and families that you're shooting, etc. I think it's quite good to have a dedicated piece of software that just deals with helping to improve your portraits. You don't necessarily need tools for landscapes and still life or whatever else it is as well, just something that is specific for portrait photography. And now there is one. From the makers of Luminar Neo has come Aperty. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, and it is a dedicated piece of software that is designed solely for improving your portraits. So we've got a copy of it in advance, and I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of a walkthrough as to the tools that are involved, how it works, and actually kind of how easy it is to play around with. So welcome along to the class. If we've not met before, my name's Steve, and thank you so much for checking out iPhotography. So, as I say, we're going to have a look through this fantastic piece of software from Sculpt, who are the makers of Luminar Neo. And if you've got Luminar Neo, Aperty actually isn't that much difference in terms of the interface. You've been very familiar with it, but there is just a selection of tools that are available. It's not like the entire version of Luminar Neo. It's just kind of given a new name. This is certainly kind of more specific, and it makes me think whether, if this is a success, or whether they're going to then go on to develop other pieces of software that are specific for certain types of photo editing. So yeah, kind of let's actually have a look through, because to say it's kind of quite a unique piece of software. I think it's actually kind of quite easy to use. Obviously, if you've got Neo already, whether you would need this necessarily, I don't think so, because all the tools are in there, but maybe this is just more condensed and it's a little bit easier to see. But either way, this is what we see when we open up the software to begin with. It's just a simple case of either opening up a folder, dropping and dragging. This is our interface. It's very simple, so there's no kind of library screen or anything like that we would go into initially. We go straight into our kind of development module. And you see here across the top, we've got our menu system. It's very easy to navigate, where we can open up images. We can go forwards and backwards, how we view our imagery. And obviously, if we want to access our account, we've got all those bits and pieces there as well. And then we've got a couple of little buttons next to it along the top as to where we can kind of open our project. So if we've got a series of images we have been working on, we've opened up multiple shots, we've got like a little library screen there. Another button that, again, we can open the image up on its own, or if we prefer to open up a folder of images, we can do. We've got an erase button. We've got a dodge and burn one as well, if you want to do a little bit of changes there. So it's a bit odd to have those kind of options just in the top, but I suppose that, they're literally just kind of one or two options on their own. They've basically got their own space there. Along the bottom bar, we've been able to favorite images. If we've got like a little film strip of photos at the bottom, and again, we can hide that film strip if we want to. We can rearrange the images in that film strip there, and we've also got like a before and after view. Down the side, on the right hand side, this will be kind of fairly similar to many pieces of photo editing software. I've started to see similarities in terms of the interfaces these days, which is kind of quite helpful if you're transitioning from one to another for certain tools. But you've got your development, which would have all your standard adjustments for exposure, etc. You've got your curves tool, we've got our color, so if we want to improve things like vibrance and saturation, etc., they are all there. Now, there are ones that will kind of come into a little bit more, as I say, they're a bit more specific to portraits, but obviously if you want to kind of play around with color, you've got all the necessary tools that you need to from there. If you want to change the individual color channels through hue, saturation, or luminance, that is all there. We've got a dedicated black and white button again, which is always very helpful, because I think just desaturating a picture by going -100 is never a good thing. It's always good to be able to kind of tweak the individual colors in a black and white format. And we've got our sharpening tool as well. If we just go down to the bottom here, we can press up before and after, and it's always good to be able to actually see the changes here. So this is with kind of sharpening raised to like 100%. We can kind of increase that a little bit more with some of the other tools underneath with the radius and then the masking to go along with it. And there is also in the details panel the option of being able to add a little bit more details. Now, this can be details with a kind of smaller area, medium area, or a larger area. On our subject here. Now you can actually see the difference between the two. I think it's kind of quite outstanding, really, in terms of the strength and the clarity of the image. It actually kind of gives it a way more kind of pop in effect, really. Now, I do say just be careful with this, because if you go right to the max with all these sliders, it's going to look very, very over processed, very, very heavy. You can say that could be a good thing depending upon what you're shooting, but I think sometimes, you know, just take these things in moderation is worthwhile. We've also got a structure option here, which is a little bit kind of like clarity and just adds a little bit more depth or a bit more softness depending upon which way you want to actually look at it. Again, we can kind of boost it a bit further. This works a little bit better if you've got lighting in the background and bokeh as well. That can become kind of quite pronounced there. But again, a lot of these options are very, very straightforward. Just to say, if you've got things like Photoshop, you've got Lightroom, even in Affinity, again, a lot of these tools, they'll all be named in a very similar way. They may just be laid out a little bit differently, but ultimately, you know, they all work in the same way. So then we've got presets. We've got that little icon bar down the right-hand side of the edge of the interface, so we can jump into our presets. We've got kind of quite a few presets already built into the software to begin with. Now, these are ones that are slightly more in tune or designed a little bit more specifically for portraits. So if you have got Luminar Neo, you'll notice that there's a massive difference in terms of the amount of presets. You haven't got all the ones for like street photography and landscapes, etc. All those taken out. Some that you've got there are designed to kind of replicate old films, like kind of Kodaks, etc. And obviously you can create your own by just kind of editing your image in a certain way, and then you can kind of save it from there. So it's all very, very simple. It's all kind of fairly straightforward, and I think this is why it's kind of good and it's intuitive for a beginner, because you don't want to walk into a piece of software with tons of different things in front of you, buttons that you don't necessarily need to use, or things that you're not going to use in terms of functionality, etc. I think to kind of keep it simple, the better, really. The next little thing to look at is masking. Now, masking is effectively selecting a particular area of your image to then edit on it. So you're isolating it. So in this instance, I would just kind of select the person that I've got here, because the masks that we've got are selecting our subject. I'm selecting the background. We do have a sky selection, and it's quite cool, but it's recognized the fact that there isn't a sky in our shot, so it's not even going to allow us to select that option. But in doing so, we can effectively select a certain area of our image, to say whether that is the face or the background of our picture, and then we can just tweak it one way or another. You can see just by playing with the sliders here, I can make some parts of it darker or lighter, and it only just affects the background. It doesn't actually affect anything else. So you can always get rid of them if you wanted to. You can kind of play around with the slider, so with the masks, and actually just select specific areas if you wanted to. It's very, very straightforward. If you wanted to add a little bit to your selection, say for example that in this instance I've selected a bit of the background but only selected a bit around of our model's head, I didn't actually select all the other parts of the background we really wanted to, we can go in with an adjustment brush and more manually select areas. Now I'm going through this a little bit quickly, so it does look a little bit rushed, but it does allow you to kind of be able to kind of pick out things a bit more individually, so then you can tweak them further on. If you're not happy with it, you can just delete it whenever you wanted to, and you've got, say, a couple of other brushes. We've either got a linear gradient, we've got radial gradient, we've got the individual brush. So the individual brush will allow us just to kind of pick out certain areas, and if we want to enhance eyes a little bit more, we can do. Now there are options a little bit later on where we can actually do this through some of the tools. There is a dedicated eye coloring tool, which is really, really cool. You can actually change the colors of your subject's eyes. We can kind of whiten up the whites of our eyes. There's even ones for like eyeliner and things like that. So this is a slightly different way of doing it. If you're used to using masks, etc., you may be a bit more comfortable, a bit more familiar with it. But there isn't a little bit, a couple of tools that are dedicated just for eyes, as there are for other features as well. There's ones for noses, ones for lips, ones for teeth as well, ones for effectively kind of tweaking the whole face as well, which is kind of quite quirky. But either way, say if you prefer to do things a little bit more manually, if you're a bit more old school like me and you kind of were, used to masks to begin with before things like AI started helping out a little bit more, then this is kind of just quite quick and easy way to do it otherwise. Right, it's got other standard tools that you would expect, such as a crop tool. Again, it's very minimal. There's not tons of options in here, but just enough that you need, really. You've got the option, obviously, you can rotate your crop around. You can rotate the whole image around. You can flip it on the horizontal. You can flip it on the vertical as well. You've got the normal lens corrections as well in here, if you need to kind of recorrect any kind of distortions or anything. So again, very, very simple. Now, this next part, the retouch panel, is here that is dedicated specifically for portraits. There's not tools that you going to need on here for landscapes or anything like that. That's not what it's for. Now, the little option at the top, the sub menu to begin with people, there's a little feature that's still to come out in that, so we haven't actually going to be able to reveal exactly what this is. But the next part, the skin one, is This is all working. So we've got our normal skin blemish removals. We've got options to remove freckles. I don't know why you do that. I think it's, you want to leave those elements in. I'd imagine I would anyway, but everybody's maybe a bit different. We've got skin smoothing. We've got improvement of details. We've got a skin color correction, which I think is kind of quite helpful because you can obviously get skin color discorrect, incorrect color balances on the skin depending upon what lighting you're using. So it's nice to have one that's dedicated to actually kind of recorrecting that. So I've been playing around with it a little bit, and I'd say it's not worked too badly here. We kind of see the before and after, especially the little kind of blemish around our model's chin here in terms of how it actually kind of gets rid of it. It doesn't take it out completely, but it certainly minimizes it. We could kind of go back and maybe play around with it a little bit more, maybe move the sliders up a little bit higher. I've not kind of pushed things too much to the max. I just wanted to kind of see what it does normally on a halfway house. But say we've got lots of other options there about kind of brightening up the face and just kind of taking off any shine as well. Not that there's really much in this shot, but if you're working with flash, say if your model's face was maybe a little bit sweaty, maybe they've been running around you doing sports portraits, it happens. That shine removal just kind of takes off that kind of stronger highlights around the forehead. Sometimes you get them on the bridge of the nose and around the cheeks, etc. So that can help a little bit if you need to. Now, this is the eye tool that I was talking about before. If you didn't want to use the masking tool, if you don't like that, this is just a very, very quick way. Drop down menu and you can choose loads of different eye colors. Whether they work or not is always dependent upon your model, but you can kind of change the color of them. You can kind of give the iris a little bit more of a flare as well. There's other options about removing the redness and the eye whitening. All around the outsides. Now, I think it's important not to take these things too far because they can end up looking a little bit OTT and a little bit fake. And I think when eyes are overdone, it's quite obvious. I think we're almost kind of in tune with what looks like a natural eye on an image. And I think if things are over-processed, especially the whites of the eye, that's quite noticeable. As I said, there's other options again for whitening teeth. There's ones for what else is going? We got makeup as well. Now we've got not got much makeup on our model here, and there's a little bit of kind of blusher maybe on her cheeks, and you can see that we can kind of strengthen it a little bit more, and we can kind of move the position of it slightly as well. We've got a width and a height and an X and a Y axis to play on, so we can actually move, where the strength of that kind of makeup or that blusher is around the front of her cheeks. Go back a little bit. Do we bring them up a bit higher? Do we bring it up a bit lower? That's kind of quite a cool little function to go with, and just kind of make sure that you're paying attention to the little bottom bar, because a lot of this has been done by the cloud. You just sometimes take kind of a couple of seconds or two for each kind of tweak or adjustment to be made. So if you move the slider and nothing happens initially, especially if you've got a big file, it may just be still kind of applying that feature. So just give it a second or two and everything does work. Obviously some things will have more of an effect than others. Like you see here, I've taken a lot of that kind of blusher out and it's reduced the redness on her a little bit more, but we can bring it back in. You can see we can now just strengthen up that color a little bit further. And we've got also the options of playing around with the contour of the face, maybe adding a little bit more shading just around the kind of the outside of the cheeks, just to maybe kind of create a sense of narrowness in the face a little bit more. Again, it's all whether you prefer to do this or not. Some people like to leave a lot of these things kind of bare and quite simple. Others may want to do it to a more kind of magazine standard where a lot more retouching goes on. So everyone's different. But as I say, this whole piece of software is designed specifically for portraits. So if you do a lot of portraits, then I think this one part of the panel anyway, this retouch area, is going to be the thing that you use kind of all the time, really. At least a number of functions within it you're going to be using all the time anyway. So this is a fun little enhancement for the eyebrows. You can see how we can add a little bit more darkness and a little bit more depth into the eyebrows themselves, which kind of gives them kind of quite a kick, really, because I know eyebrows, they're great for obviously, framing the eyes. And if you've got a nicely kind of, threaded set of eyebrows, you really want to bring that through, on models. I think it can be kind of quite striking feature, certainly. So yeah, I think that works out quite well. And I've not had to kind of go back and change things or look at it and go, actually, I didn't really like using that tool. I've used a lot of these tools kind of in this edit, so hopefully it shows you that they are all very helpful and they're all delicately done. It's not as if you kind of get up to a certain point, maybe like kind of 50%, 60%, and you're thinking, oh, hang on, this is way too much. I only want to use a small amount. I think you tend to use kind of a fair amount of each of these sliders as we go through. Now, the next little drop down under the kind of the people section, the retouch section, is Reshape. Now, this may be controversial. I'd say controversial. It's going to be, again, an individual choice. I don't think I would find myself using this a lot. It depends on the client that you have as to whether they actually kind of quite happy with having these elements done or not. So I think it's very, very important that you actually speak to your client in respects to doing any of these edits beforehand, whether you want to be tweaking faces, narrowing the narrowness, kind of making the face look a little bit more narrow, can make it a little bit more wider. We can raise and lower the position of the eyebrows. That could be good for kind of expressions if you want to kind of enhance expressions a bit further. But actually, I think changing the construct, it's like the old liquify tool in Photoshop to actually kind of, Photoshop and manipulate the shape of the face and the nose, etc. It's up to you. They work, and I think they work well. I don't think they are over powerful in the sense that, oh god, it's obviously just gone way too far. I think they're done kind of quite well. So whatever kind of algorithm or computer wizardry is going on in the background to kind of do this, I think it works actually quite well, and it doesn't let you go too far. So yeah, certainly it won't necessarily maybe look exactly the same as how your model does look, but I know it kind of crafts their face. I think that's the right word. Shapes their face a little bit more flatteringly, potentially, in a way that the client may be happy with. But you need to check in with them on the first. Then there is also kind of creative effects as well, where we can add in lighting. Now, this is actually covered more extensively in our Luminar Neo course that we've got. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, because I think some of this is better explained in full in a full tutorial. And so that's covered all in our course. So you do check it out. If you go to iphotography.com, look for Luminar Neo. That is all covered in there, with, again, a number of the other these tools as well that you're seeing here, but especially Studio Light, Portrait, Bokeh, the LUTs, the film grain, the vignettes, they're all there. But if you are a portrait photographer, you're looking to kind of get into portraits and you're doing it very, very regularly, you're shooting with clients all the time, then I think it's very, very much worth checking out. So I hope you've enjoyed this kind of look into Aperty. I think there's still a few more tools to be added to it in time as well. So we've got kind of a very early version of the software itself. So do check it out, or I can give you links wherever you see this video to actually have a look at the software a bit further. And I hope you enjoy it. If you've got any feedback, please let me know, and we'll see you in another class.